what is justice? What is injustice? Just because you have a lot of money, does that mean you get to make the rules and tell us what's true and what's not true? You get to have your yachts, your piles of gold, make the rules? Or is there something else to justice? Does justice exist beyond mere power and wealth? Is it better to have justice even if you don't have power and wealth? So Thrasymachus finally calms down enough for Socrates to ask a bunch of questions to him and have him answer about his version of the definition of justice. So here's the end of the discussion with Thrasymachus, at which point Thrasymachus exits and they get to work on building the allegory between the state is to justice as the soul, individual human psyche is to justice. So, Socrates says, and he who lives well is blessed and happy, and he who lives ill is the reverse of happy. Certainly, admits Thrasymachus. Then the just is happy and the unjust miserable. So be it. But happiness and not misery is profitable, of course. Then, my blessed Thrasymachus, injustice can never be more profitable than justice. Let this, Socrates, Thrasymachus said, be your entertainment at the festival to the goddess of Bendis. And he replies, for which I am indebted to you, Thrasymachus, now that you have grown gentle towards me and have left off scolding. Nevertheless, I have not been well entertained, but that was my own fault and not yours. As an epicure snatches a taste of every dish which is successively brought to a table, he not having allowed himself time to enjoy the one before, so have I gone from one subject to another without having discovered what I sought at first, the nature of justice. I left that inquiry and turned away to consider whether justice is virtue and wisdom or evil and folly with you. And when there arose a further question about the comparative advantages of justice and injustice, I could not refrain from passing on to that. And the result of the whole discussion has been that I know nothing at all. For I know not what justice is. And therefore, I am not likely to know whether it is or is not a virtue, nor can I say whether the just man is happy or unhappy. That's the end of Book 1. Book 2. With these words, I was thinking that I had made an end of the discussion. But the end, in truth, proved only to be a beginning. For Glaucon, who was always the most pugnacious of men, was dissatisfied at Thrasymachus's leaving. He wanted to have the battle out. So, Glaucon said to me, Socrates, do you really wish to persuade us, or only to seem to have persuaded us? That to be just is always better than to be unjust. I should really wish to persuade you, I replied, if I could. Then certainly you have not succeeded. All right, so then sets up the task to prove that justice is always better, and that's when he's going to start getting into building the model of the city-state. Socrates really wants to persuade these young and potential future politicians of Athens that justice by itself is always better than injustice, especially since if you act unjustly, the conventional wisdom is that you'll get power and money and be able to do whatever you want. So Socrates says, I feel that I am unequal to the task, and my inability is brought home to me by the fact that you were not satisfied with the answer which I made to Thrasymachus, proving, as I thought, the superiority which justice has over injustice. And yet I cannot refuse to help. While breath and speech remain to me, I am afraid that there would be an impiety in being present when justice is evil spoken of, and not lifting up a hand in her defense. And therefore I had best give such help as I can. Glaucon and the rest entreated me by all means not to let the question drop, but to proceed in the investigation. They wanted to arrive at the truth, first, about the nature of justice and injustice, and secondly, about their relative advantages. I told them what I really thought, that the inquiry would be of a serious nature and would require very good eyes. Seeing then, I said, that we are no great wits, I think that we had better adopt a method which I may illustrate thus. Suppose that a short-sighted person had been asked by someone to read small letters from a distance, and it occurred to someone else that they might be found in another place which was larger, and in which the letters were larger. If they were the same, and he could read the larger letters first, and then proceed to the lesser, this would have been thought a rare piece of good fortune. Very true, said Adeimantus. But how does this illustration apply to our inquiry? I will tell you, I replied. Justice, which is the subject of our inquiry, is, as you know, sometimes spoken of as the virtue of an individual, and sometimes as the virtue of a state. True, he replied. And is not a state larger than an individual? It is. In this sense, they're using state as the same as country. Then, in the larger, the quantity of justice is likely to be larger and more easily discernible. I propose, therefore, that we inquire into the nature of justice and injustice, first as they appear in the state, and secondly in the individual, proceeding from the greater to the lesser and comparing them. That, he said, is an excellent proposal. And if we imagine the state in process of creation, we shall see the justice and injustice of the state in process of creation also. I dare say. When the state is completed, there may be a hope that the object of our search will be more easily discovered. Yes, far more easily. But ought we to attempt to construct one? I said. For to do so, as I am inclined to think, will be a very serious task. Reflect, therefore. I have reflected, said Adeimantus, and I am anxious that you should proceed. A state, or a country, I said, arises, as I conceive, out of the need of humankind. No one is self-sufficing, but all of us have many wants. Can any other origin of a state be imagined? There can be no other. Then, as we have many wants, and many persons are needed to supply them, one takes a helper for one purpose, and another for another. And when these partners and helpers are gathered together in one habitation, the body of inhabitants is termed a state. True, he said. And they exchange with one another, and one gives and another receives, under the idea that the exchange will be for their good. Very true. Then, I said, let us begin and create an idea, a state. And yet the true creator is necessity, who is the mother of our invention. Of course, he replied. Now, the first and greatest of necessities is food, which is the condition of life and existence. Certainly. The second is a dwelling, and the third clothing, and the like. True. And now let us see how our city will be able to supply this great demand. We may suppose that one person is a farmer, another is a builder, someone else a weaver. Shall we add to them a shoemaker, or perhaps some other purveyor of our bodily wants? Quite right. The barest notion of a state must include 4 or 5 people, clearly. And how will they proceed? Will each bring the result of their labor into a common stock? The individual farmer, for example, producing for 4 and laboring 4 times as long and as much as they need in provision of food, which they supply others as well as themselves? Or will that farmer have nothing to do with others and not be at the trouble of producing for them, but provide for himself alone 1/4 of the food and 1/4 of the time, and in remaining 3/4 of that time be employed in making a house or a coat or a pair of shoes, having no partnership with others, but supplying only themselves? Adeimantus thought that he should aim at producing food only, and not at being a jack of all trades, producing everything. Probably, I replied. This is division of labor. That would be the better way. And when I hear you say this, I am myself reminded that we are not all alike. There are differences of our natures among us, which are adapted to different occupations. Very true. And will you have a work better done when the workman has many occupations, or when the workman concentrates on only one? When they have only one. Further, there can be no doubt that a work is spoiled when not done at the right time, no doubt. For business is not disposed to wait until the doer of the business is at leisure, but the doer must follow up what they are doing and make the business the first object. They must. And if so, we must infer that all things are produced more plentifully and easily and of a better quality when one person does one thing which is natural to them and does it at the right time and leaves other things to other people. Undoubtedly. Then more than 4 citizens will be required, for the farmer will not make their own plow or instruments or other implements of agriculture, but if they are to be good for farming, neither will the builder make their own tools. And he too needs many, and in a like manner the weaver and the shoemaker. True. Then carpenters and smiths and many other artisans will be sharers in our little state, which is already beginning to grow? True. Yet, even if we add all the other professions, like shepherds and other herdsmen and other farmers and people to build all the plows and other instruments, and our state will not be very large. That is true. Yet neither will be very small. Then again, there is a situation of the city to find a place where nothing need be imported is well nigh impossible. Impossible. Then there must be another class of citizens who will bring in the required supply from another city. There must. But if the trader goes empty-handed, having nothing which they require, who will supply their need? Will the trader come back empty-handed? That is certain. And therefore, what they produce at home must not only equal enough for themselves, but such both in quantity and quality as to accommodate those from whom their wants are supplied. Very true. So they're going to have to produce a surplus to trade for what they want with other cities, other states, other countries. Very true. Then more farmers and more artisans will be required? They will. Not to mention the importers and exporters who are called merchants, yes? Then we shall want merchants? We shall. And if merchandise is to be carried over the sea, skillful sailors will also be needed, and in considerable numbers. Yes, in considerable numbers. Then again, within the city, how will they exchange their productions? To secure an exchange was, as you remember, one of our principal objects when we formed them into a society and constituted a state. Clearly, they will buy and sell. Then they will need an agora, a marketplace, and money tokens for purpose of exchange, certainly. Suppose now that a farmer or an artisan brings some production to market, and he comes at a time when no one is ready to exchange with him. Is he to leave his products and sit idle in the marketplace? No, not at all. he will find people there who, seeing the want, undertake the office of salesmen. In well-ordered states there are commonly those who are the weakest in bodily strength, and therefore of little use for any other purpose. Their duty is to be in the market, and to give money in exchange for goods to those who desire to sell, and to take money from those who desire to buy. This want then creates a class of retail traders in our state. Is not retailer the term which is applied to those who sit in the marketplace, engaged in buying and selling, while those who wander from one city to another are called merchants? Yes, he said. And there is another class of servants who are intellectually hardly on the level of companionship. Still they have plenty of bodily strength for labor, which accordingly they sell, and are called, if I do not mistake, hirelings, or hired hands, hired help. Hire being their name which is given to the price of their labor. True. Then hirelings will help to make up our population. Yes. And now, Adeimantus, our state is matured and perfected? I think so. Where, then, is justice? And where is there injustice? And in what part of the state did they spring up? Probably in the dealings of the citizens with one another. I cannot imagine that they are more likely to be found anywhere else. I dare say that you are right in your suggestion, I said. We had better think the matter out and not shrink from the inquiry. Let us then consider first of all what will be their way of life. Now that we have thus established them, will they not produce corn and wine and clothes and shoes and build houses for themselves? And when they are housed, they will work in the summer commonly, stripped and barefoot, but in winter substantially clothed and with shoes on their feet. They will feed on barley meal and on wheat flour, baking and kneading them, making noble cakes and loaves. They will serve up on a mat of reeds or on clean leaves, themselves reclining the while upon beds strewn with yew or myrtle. And they and their children will feast, drinking of the wine which they have made, wearing garlands on their heads and hymning the praises of the gods in happy converse with one another. And they will take care that their families do not exceed their means, having an eye to poverty or war. But, Glaucon said, interposing, you have not given them a relish to their meal. So it was too bare bones for Glaucon. The city was too bare bones. He wants some relish. So the relishes, that's other kind of things that make life a little bit more spicy, a little bit more worth living, according to Glaucon. True, Socrates said. I had forgotten. Of course, they must have relishes, such as salt and olives and cheese. They will boil roots and herbs, such as country people prepare. For dessert, we shall give them figs and peas and beans, and they will roast myrtle berries and acorns at the fire, drinking in moderation. And with such a diet, they may be expected to live in peace and health to a good old age, and bequeath a similar life to their children after them. Yes, said Socrates, if you were providing for a city of pigs, how else would you feed the beasts? So, at this point, Socrates is just saying these are the basic needs of humans to be in community and have enough healthy things. Food, clothing, shelter, and then enough extra little relish, extra things to have some nice things. But that's it. Just the basics covered and plus a little extra nice things. And notice what he says. If you don't, this is moderation for a human. You're not going to be sick. You're not going to be overweight. You're not going to have a lot of problems because you're not eating a lot of unhealthy things. You're going to be healthy and you're going to live to a good old age. And Glaucon pushes him further and says, why, you should give them the ordinary conveniences of life. People who are to be comfortable are to be accustomed to lie on sofas and dine off tables, and they should have sauces and sweets in the modern style. So in modern terms, Glaucon is saying, hey, you need to have big fancy buildings. You need to have luxury cars. You need to have big fancy restaurants for people to go out to. You need to have yachts for people. People need to be able to have private airplanes. These are the luxury things that Glaucon is talking about. This is 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. So you have to kind of update it to the modern era. But he's saying people want yachts, people want vacation homes, people want extra things, people want lots of desserts and beautiful restaurants to go out to and fancy clothes. Not just the basics and plus a little bit. They want a lot more. People have greed. People have desires. Socrates says, yes, now I understand. The question which you would have me consider is not only how a state, but how a luxurious state is created. And possibly there is no harm in this, for in such a state we shall more likely see how justice and injustice originate. So this is the main point. Socrates is content to look at the just state, the state that just meets its minimums for a human plus a little extra, and all the humans are happy, they're all healthy, they're not living above their means, they're not grasping after things that they don't really need, they're not being greedy, they're not being luxurious, they're not being fancy. But Glaucon is saying, hey, we need to go for luxury, we need to go for fanciness. And Socrates says, good, I'm glad you said that, and I thought you would, because that's going to let us get into the unjust things. So all the crazy things that the state has to do to create luxury, that's injustice. Those are the bad things that he's going to have to create. So Socrates says, we may more likely see how justice and injustice originate in a state like this. In my opinion, the true and healthy constitution of the state is the one in which I have already described, the basic one. But if you wish to also see a state at a fever heat, I have no objection, for I suspect that many will not be satisfied with the simpler way of life. They will be for adding sofas and tables and other furniture and dainties, perfumes, incense, courtesans and cakes, yachts, vacation homes, fancy places to go eat, luxury cars. All of these not only for one sort only, but in every variety. We must go beyond the necessities of which I was first speaking. This is consumerism, such as houses and clothes and shoes, and the arts of a painter and the embroiderer will have to be set in motion, and gold and ivory and all sorts of jewelry and materials must also be procured. True, he said. Then we must enlarge our borders, for the original healthy state is no longer sufficient. So look what's happening. You're getting to injustice. You're having to muscle people around to get what you need beyond your necessity. Now will the city have to fill and swell with a multitude of callings which were not required by any natural want, such as the whole tribe of hunters and actors, of whom one large class have to do with forms and colors. Another will be the votaries of music, poets, and their attendant train of rhapsodes, players, dancers, contractors, also makers of diverse kinds of articles, including women's dresses and fancy clothes for men. And shall we want more servants? Will not tutors be also in request, and nurses, wet and dry, and barbers, and all kinds of other confectioners and cooks, and swineherds too, who were not needed and therefore had no place in the former edition in our state, but are needed now? They must not be forgotten, and there will be animals of many other kinds if people eat them. Certainly. And living this way, we shall have much greater need of physicians than before, because people are going to be eating beyond moderation. They're going to be drinking and eating in excess. Much greater needs of physicians. And the country which was enough to support the original inhabitants will be too small now, and not enough? Quite true. Then a slice of our neighbor's land, we will want that for us, for pasture and tillage. They will want a slice of ours, if, like ourselves, they exceed the limits of necessity, and give themselves up to the unlimited accumulation of wealth? That, Socrates, will be inevitable. And shall we go to war, Glaucon? We will, shall we not? Most certainly, he replied. Then, without determining as yet whether war does good or harm, thus much we may affirm, that now we have discovered war to be derived from the causes which are also the causes of almost all the evils in states, private as well as public, undoubtedly. And our state must once more enlarge, and this time the enlargement will be nothing short of a whole army, which will have to go out and fight with the invaders for all that we have, as well as for the things and persons whom we were describing above. Why, he said, are the people not capable of defending themselves? No, not if we were right in the principle which was acknowledged when we were framing the state. The principle, as you will remember, was that one person cannot practice many arts with success. Very true. But is not war an art? Certainly. And an art requiring much attention as shoemaking? Quite true. So they'll need a standing army. So that's how he starts this comparison between the soul is to justice as the state is to justice. So he's looking at making a model of a state so he can look at justice in the state and compare it to a person's psyche, a person's soul. And that's, I think, a part that a lot of people either don't ever read or don't ever get taught or don't understand is the part that I just read when he's starting to make his state. Socrates first describes a very basic, just state where people aren't greedy and they aren't luxurious and they aren't fancy. They're just basic with a little bit of extra, a little bit of spice, a little bit of relish. And then Glaucon and the others say, hey, no, we want luxury. We want all the things. We want to go beyond what we need. We want to make life worth living. We want extra. We want luxury. And Socrates says, good, I'm glad you said that, because that'll allow us to look at injustice. And oh, by the way, that's greed, and that's also the cause of war. Thank you for joining part 2 of Plato's Republic. And part 3 is coming up next. Please like and subscribe, and check out the links in the description to learn more.